The alien warship Ecliptica floated quietly through the endless blackness of space. Its metallic surface gleamed faintly under the light of a distant star. Inside, the crew moved about their duties, their steps echoing softly in the narrow corridors. They were tired from years of fighting, tired from the constant strain of war. But among them was one who stood out. His name was Kale, a warrior whose reputation stretched across the stars. He had led his people to victory time, and again against humanity's forces. Yet, despite his many accomplishments, there was something heavy in his gaze, something that hinted at secrets buried deep within him. Tonight, the ship had stopped near a barren moon for repairs. The hum of machinery filled the air as engineers worked tirelessly to fix damaged systems. In the mess hall, a group of aliens gathered around a table, sharing stories and laughter to distract themselves from the weight of their mission. Someone mentioned Earth, and the conversation turned to humans, their strange ways, their stubbornness, their refusal to give up even when all seemed lost. Curious eyes turned to Kale. Of everyone on board, he had spent the most time studying humans, fighting them, and learning their tactics. "Tell us," said Nira, her voice tinged with excitement. "What are they really like? Are they as clever as they say?" Kale looked at her, then at the others. For a moment, he didn't answer. His glowing eyes scanned the room, taking in the eager faces of his comrades. Finally, he leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "You think you know humans," he began, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made everyone pause. "But what I've seen, it will change how you look at this war." The room grew quieter, the background noise fading as everyone focused on Kale. He took a slow breath before continuing. "Humans aren't like us. They don't fight because they're ordered to. They fight because they believe in something. Even when everything is falling apart around them, they keep going. It doesn't matter if they're soldiers or farmers or children. They'd find a way to resist." One of the younger crew members, Vren, frowned. "That sounds impossible. How can anyone keep fighting when they're losing?" Kale gave her a small, sad smile. "Because losing isn't the end for them. Every defeat makes them stronger. Every loss pushes them to try harder. I've seen it myself." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Do you remember the battle at Gamma 7? We thought we had them cornered. Their ships were outnumbered, their weapons weaker. But instead of running, they used the debris field to their advantage. They lured us in, struck where we least expected, and escaped with barely a scratch." Murmurs rippled through the group. Gamma 7 had been a costly victory for the aliens, though none of them had understood why until now. "And that's just one example," Kale added. "There are others, stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about this war." Nira tilted her head, intrigued. "Like what?" Kale hesitated, his expression darkening. "Stories of bravery, stories of sacrifice, stories that will haunt me forever." He glanced down at the table, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on its surface. When he looked up again, his eyes held a mixture of sadness and determination. "But those are tales for another time. Tonight, I'll start with my first encounter with humans. It happened aboard a scout vessel called Pioneer. What I found there changed me." The room fell silent once more, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Whatever Kale was about to share, they could tell it wouldn't be easy to hear. Kale's voice was steady as he began to recount his first encounter with humans. The memory seemed vivid, as if it had happened only yesterday. "It was early in the war," he said, leaning back slightly in his chair. "We had intercepted a human scout vessel named Pioneer. It wasn't heavily armed, but it was fast and had been causing trouble along our supply lines. My orders were simple: capture the ship and interrogate its crew." The others listened closely, their eyes fixed on Kale. He continued, "When we boarded the Pioneer, it was quiet, too quiet. The lights flickered, and there was damage everywhere. Panels sparked, Wires hung loose, and the air smelled of smoke. We moved cautiously, weapons ready, but what we found wasn't what we expected. He paused, remembering the moment clearly. In the command center, there was just one man left alive. His name was Captain Alan Hayes. Cale described Alan as a tall, lean figure with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood, but his stance was firm. Despite being surrounded, Alan showed no fear. He stood there, arms crossed, staring at us like we were nothing more than an inconvenience. Cale said, shaking his head slightly. I asked him why he hadn't fled when he had the chance. Do you know what he told me? The group leaned in, hanging on his every word. He said, running wouldn't change anything. If I leave, you'll still come for my people. So here I am. Cale mimicked Alan's tone, making it sound calm yet unyielding. His words, they struck me. Here was a man who knew he was beaten, but he didn't care. All that mattered to him was protecting others. Nira frowned, her curiosity growing. Did he try to fight back? Cale shook his head. No, not physically. He didn't have the means, but he fought with his words. He told me about humanity, their history, their struggles, their dreams. He spoke of how they had risen from chaos to build civilizations, how they had faced extinction-level events and survived. And he warned me. Warned you? Vren asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Yes, Cale replied, his expression darkening. He said, you think you're fighting soldiers, but you're wrong. You're fighting an idea. Humanity doesn't give up. Even if you destroy us, even if you wipe us out, the idea of who we are will live on, and it will haunt you. The room fell silent as Cale let those words hang in the air. Finally, one of the younger crew members, Joran, broke the quiet. What did you do then? Cale sighed, his gaze distant. I followed my orders. We took him into custody, but he hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Something about him stayed with me. The way he carried himself, the way he spoke, it wasn't just defiance, it was conviction. Like he truly believed every word he said. That must have been unsettling, Nira murmured. It was, Cale admitted. But it wasn't the end of it. Before we left the Pioneer asterisk, I noticed something else. On one of the walls, someone had scrawled a message in bold letters. It read, For Earth. At first, I thought it was just propaganda, a meaningless slogan. But later, I realized it meant something deeper. What did it mean? Vren asked. Cale looked at her, his glowing eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and unease. It meant they weren't fighting for themselves. They were fighting for something bigger, for their home, for their future, for the people they loved. That's what makes them dangerous. They don't see this as just a war. They see it as survival. And when survival is at stake, humans become unstoppable. The group sat in silence, processing what Cale had shared. None of them had ever thought of their enemies in such terms before. For the first time, they began to wonder, not just about the humans, but about the cost of the war itself. Cale's voice grew quieter as he moved on to another story, one that still lingered in his mind like a shadow. After my encounter with Captain Alan Hayes, I thought I understood humans better, he said, his tone thoughtful. But then came the siege at Epsilon 9. That's when I truly began to see how far they were willing to go. The others leaned forward, their attention unwavering. Cale continued. Epsilon 9 was supposed to be an easy target. It was just a small mining station on the edge of human-controlled space. We had tracked their supply lines and knew it was a key point for them. Taking it would cut off their resources and weaken their defenses in the region. But what we found there, it wasn't what we expected. He paused, collecting his thoughts. When we arrived, the station looked abandoned. The outer hull was scarred from previous battles, and parts of it were crumbling. But as we moved closer, we realized it wasn't empty. Someone was waiting for us. Nira frowned. Who was in charge? A woman named Lisa Hart, Kel replied. She was a commander, though not one we had heard of before. She wasn't famous or decorated, but she was smart, smarter than any of us anticipated. She had turned the entire station into a trap. Joran raised an eyebrow. A trap? How? Kale nodded. She used the station's weaknesses to her advantage. The damaged corridors became choke points. Loose wires and exposed panels were rigged to explode. Even the ventilation system was filled with gas that could knock us out. Every step we took, every door we opened, it was all designed to slow us down and wear us out. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Vren asked, "How did you manage to get through?" "It wasn't easy," Kale admitted. "We lost many soldiers. Every time we thought we had gained ground, another ambush awaited us. Lisa's team fought back fiercely, using makeshift weapons and clever tactics. They didn't have the numbers or the technology we did, but they made up for it with sheer determination." "What about Lisa herself?" Nira asked. Cal's expression softened slightly. "She was remarkable. Even when we finally cornered her, she refused to surrender. She told me, 'You can take this station, but you'll pay for every inch of it.' And she meant it. Her people had prepared for weeks, knowing they couldn't win but determined to make our victory costly." The room fell silent as Cal let the weight of his words settle. Finally, Joran spoke up. "Why didn't they retreat? Why stay and fight if they knew they couldn't win?" Kale sighed. "Because retreating wouldn't have helped them. Their goal wasn't to survive, it was to protect others. By holding us off at Epsilon 9, they gave reinforcements time to regroup elsewhere. Every life lost there bought precious time for the rest of their forces. That's admirable," Nira said hesitantly. "And terrifying." Kale nodded. "It is. Humans don't just fight to live. They fight to give others a chance. Even when hope seems gone, they find a way to keep going. Lisa Hart and her team proved that to me. They showed me that humanity's strength isn't in their weapons or ships. It's in their hearts." Vren shook her head in disbelief. "I don't understand how anyone can be so stubborn." "Stubbornness isn't the right word," Cal corrected her. "It's resolve. It's the belief that no matter how bad things get, giving up isn't an option. That's why they're such dangerous opponents. They don't measure success by victories. They measure it by whether they've done everything they can to protect what matters." As Cal finished speaking, the group sat quietly, reflecting on his words. None of them had ever considered their enemies in this light before. For the first time, they began to realize that the war wasn't just about conquering territory or defeating armies. It was about facing an unbreakable spirit, a spirit that refused to yield, no matter the cost. Kel's voice grew softer as he moved on to another memory, one that weighed heavily on him. "Not all my encounters with humans were battles," he began, his glowing eyes distant. "Some moments, they weren't about weapons or tactics. They were about something much harder to face: innocence." The others shifted in their seats, sensing the change in tone. Nira leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Kale hesitated before continuing. "It was during a mission to scout a remote colony world. The planet had been hit hard in an earlier attack. Most of the settlements were destroyed, and survivors were few. My team and I landed to assess the damage and gather information. We didn't expect to find anyone alive." "But you did?" Vren asked. Kale nodded. "Yes. In the ruins of what used to be a small village, we found a girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Her name was Emily." He paused, his expression tightening as if reliving the moment. "She was hiding in the wreckage of a collapsed building, clutching a tattered doll to her chest. Her clothes were torn, and her face was streaked with dirt and tears. But when she saw us, she didn't scream or run. She just stared at me with wide, frightened eyes." Joran frowned. "What did she say?" Cal's voice dropped even lower. She whispered, "Are you here to kill me?" The room fell silent. The weight of those words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Finally, Nira broke the quiet. What did you tell her? I told her no, Kel replied. I knelt down so I wasn't towering over her and said, I'm not here to hurt you. She didn't believe me at first. She clutched her doll tighter and took a step back. But then she asked me something that I'll never forget. What was it? Vren pressed. She asked, why did you destroy my home? Kel's voice cracked slightly, and he took a moment to steady himself. I didn't know how to answer her. How do you explain war to a child? How do you justify destroying everything she knew, everything she loved? All I could say was, it wasn't personal. But even as I said it, I knew how hollow those words sounded. The group sat in stunned silence, imagining the scene. Joran finally spoke up. What happened next? Kale sighed. I told my team to leave her alone. I didn't want them near her. I stayed with her for a while, just sitting there in the rubble. She didn't talk much after that. She just held her doll and looked around at the ruins of her world. Eventually, I called for a transport to take her to safety. But before she left, she handed me the doll. Nira tilted her head. Why would she give you her doll? Kale shrugged. I don't know. Maybe she thought I needed it more than she did. Or maybe she wanted me to remember her, to remember what we had done. He paused, his gaze dropping to the table. I still have it. It's in my quarters. Sometimes I look at it and think about her. About all the children like her who get caught in this war. That must have been difficult, Nira said gently. It was, Kale admitted. Seeing her reminded me that not all humans are soldiers. Some are just people. People trying to live their lives, to find happiness in whatever way they can. And when we destroy their homes, we're not just fighting an enemy. We're taking away their dreams, their futures. Vren shook her head slowly. I never thought about it like that. Most of us don't, Kale said. We see humans as a threat, as something to be defeated. But when you look into the eyes of a child, it's hard to see them as anything other than victims. Victims of a war they didn't choose. As Kel finished speaking, the room was filled with a somber quiet. His comrades exchanged uneasy glances, each lost in their own thoughts. For the first time, they began to wonder if the cost of victory was worth the price, not just for themselves, but for those who had no choice but to endure the consequences. Kel's voice grew colder as he moved on to another story, one that still made his comrades uneasy. Not all humans fight with weapons or words, he said, his tone sharp. Some use deception, lies so clever they can turn the tide of a battle in moments. Let me tell you about Lieutenant Ryan Cole. The group leaned in, intrigued by the shift in Cal's tone. Nira asked, who was he? He was a human officer, Cal replied. Smart, resourceful, and dangerously unpredictable. We first encountered him during a critical battle at a space station called Delta 12. It was a key stronghold for humanity, and we had spent weeks planning how to take it. But Ryan, he changed everything. Joran frowned. How? Cal's eyes narrowed as he recalled the events. When we arrived, Ryan's forces were outnumbered and outgunned. Most commanders would have tried to defend the station or retreat, but not Ryan. Instead, he sent a message offering to surrender. He claimed his crew was tired, low on supplies, and ready to give up. He even offered to let us board the station without resistance. That sounds too good to be true, Vren muttered. It was, Kale agreed, but we didn't know that at the time. His message seemed sincere. He sounded exhausted, defeated. So we accepted his offer and moved in. What happened? Nira asked, her curiosity growing. Cal's jaw tightened. It was a trap. The moment our troops entered the station, alarms blared, and the doors sealed shut behind us. Explosions rocked the corridors, cutting off our escape routes. Hidden weapons fired from every direction, targeting our soldiers. And then Ryan's team struck. They ambushed you, Joran guessed. Yes, Kale said, his voice heavy with frustration. But it wasn't just an ambush. Ryan had turned the entire station into a maze of traps and decoys. Every room we cleared led to another surprise. Every corridor we secured became a death trap. His people fought with everything they had: grenades, improvised explosives, even handheld tools. They knew they couldn't win, but they didn't care. Their goal was to cripple us, no matter the cost. Vren shook her head. Why would they sacrifice themselves like that? Because Ryan had planned it that way, Kale explained. He knew his team wouldn't survive, but he gave them a chance to strike back. Before the battle, he told them, if we fall, we'll make sure they remember us. And they did. By the time we regained control of the station, most of his crew was dead, including Ryan himself. The room fell silent as the weight of Cal's words sank in. Finally, Nira spoke up. Did you find out why he did it? Kale nodded. Yes. After the battle, we recovered some of their logs. Ryan had known we were coming for Delta 12. He also knew it was a vital point for both sides. If we took it, we'd gain a major advantage. So he decided to deny us that victory, even if it meant losing everything. That's impressive, Joran admitted reluctantly. And terrifying. It was both, Kale agreed. Ryan's tactics weren't just about strategy. They were about sacrifice. He understood that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't strength or numbers. It's the willingness to give everything for your cause. Naira hesitated before asking, do you respect him? Kale paused, his glowing eyes distant. Respect. Yes. Admire. No. What Ryan did was brilliant, but it was also brutal. He didn't just sacrifice himself. He sacrificed his entire team. That kind of leadership, it's hard to understand, hard to accept. Vren looked down at the table, her brow furrowed. I don't think I could do something like that. Lead people knowing they'd die. Neither could most of us, Kale said softly. But that's what makes humans different. They're willing to pay any price for what they believe in, even when it costs them everything. As Kale finished speaking, the group sat quietly, each lost in their own thoughts. The story of Ryan Cole had left them unsettled, forcing them to confront the lengths their enemies were willing to go to protect their ideals. For the first time, they began to wonder, not just about the humans, but about themselves. What would they be willing to sacrifice for their own cause? And would they ever truly understand the enemy they were fighting? Kel's voice softened again as he moved on to another side of the war, one that didn't involve battles or strategies. Not everything about humans is about fighting, he said, his tone almost wistful. Even in the middle of this war, they find ways to hold on to who they are. They create, they dream, they hope. And sometimes, those small things are more powerful than any weapon. The group listened intently, their earlier tension easing slightly. Nira tilted her head. What do you mean? Kale leaned back in his chair, his glowing eyes distant. I've seen it myself, in places I never expected. Once, during a patrol near a human settlement, I came across something unusual. It was a wall, half destroyed by bombing, but someone had painted a mural on it. Bright colors covered the cracked surface. Images of fields, rivers, and skies. There were children playing, families smiling, animals running free. It was beautiful. Vren frowned. Why would they do that? Wasn't the settlement under attack? It was, Kale replied. But even with the threat of destruction hanging over them, someone took the time to create something beautiful, to remind themselves, and anyone who saw it, of what they were fighting for. Joran scratched his head. That doesn't make sense. If they're losing, why focus on art? Because it gives them hope, Kale explained. Humans don't just fight to survive. They fight for the life they want to return to, the life they want to build. That mural wasn't just paint on a wall. It was a promise that no matter how bad things got, they wouldn't give up on their dreams. Nira nodded slowly. It sounds inspiring. It is, Kale agreed. And it's not just art. On another mission, I found records of human scientists working tirelessly to preserve knowledge, even when their labs were crumbling around them. They risked their lives to save books, data, anything they could. One scientist told me, if we lose today, someone else might win tomorrow. And when they do, they'll need this. That's impressive, Vren admitted. But isn't it pointless if they die? Not to them, Kale said firmly. To humans, nothing is ever truly lost as long as someone remembers it. They pass down stories, traditions, ideas. Even when cities fall and civilizations crumble, they'd rebuild. They carry their past with them into the future. Joran crossed his arms. So, you're saying their strength isn't just in fighting? No, Kale replied. Their strength is in resilience. In finding joy even in the darkest times. In refusing to let despair define them. I've seen families laughing together after losing everything. I've heard songs sung in bombed-out shelters. I've watched people share their last scraps of food because they believed in taking care of each other. The room fell quiet as Cal's words sank in. Finally, Nira spoke up. Do you think we could learn from them? Cal hesitated, his expression thoughtful. Maybe. But it's hard to understand until you see it for yourself. Humans aren't just fighters or survivors. They're dreamers, builders, believers. Even when the odds are against them, they keep going. Not because they think they'll win, but because giving up isn't an option. Vren sighed, shaking her head. It's strange. I always thought of them as dangerous. But now, Kale prompted. Now I'm not so sure, she admitted. They're still our enemies, but they're also something more, something harder to explain. Kale nodded. Exactly. That's what makes them so unpredictable and so dangerous. You can destroy their ships, their weapons, their homes, but you can't destroy their spirit. That's why this war won't end easily, not against humans. As the group sat in silence, reflecting on Cal's words, they began to realize the true challenge they faced. It wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about confronting an unbreakable will, a will that refused to be extinguished, no matter the cost. Cal's voice grew quieter as he reached the final part of his story. His glowing eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of his comrades. They had listened intently to everything he had shared. Stories of bravery, sacrifice, and resilience. Now it was time for him to share his thoughts about what it all meant. When I first joined this war, Kale began, I thought it would be simple. We were stronger, faster, and more advanced. Humans were just another species trying to survive. I believed we would win quickly and move on. But now I'm not so sure. Nira frowned. What do you mean? Kale leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. I mean that winning isn't the hardest part. It's what comes after. Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when this war ends? What kind of universe will we live in then? The group exchanged uneasy glances. Joran spoke up. We'll have peace, won't we? Isn't that the point? Peace? Cal repeated, his tone heavy with doubt. Maybe. But at what cost? Every battle we fight, every life we take, it changes us. And it changes them. Humans don't forget. They remember every loss, every scar. Even if we win, they'll never stop fighting. Not in their hearts. Vren shook her head. But if we defeat them, they won't have a choice. Right. It's not that simple, Kel replied. Humans aren't like other enemies we faced. They don't give up, even when it seems impossible. Their strength isn't in their weapons or their numbers. It's in their spirit, in their refusal to let go of hope. If we crush them completely, we'll only create more hatred, more resistance. Nara hesitated before asking. So what are you saying? That we should stop fighting? No, Kale said firmly. I'm saying we need to understand what we're fighting for, and what we're willing to lose in the process. War isn't just about victory. It's about the choices we make along the way, who we become, what kind of future we want to build. Joran crossed his arms, looking thoughtful. Do you think we can find a way to end this without destroying each other? I don't know, Kale admitted. But I do know one thing. If we keep seeing humans only as enemies, we'll never truly understand them. And if we don't understand them, we'll never find a way to coexist. The room fell silent as Cal's words hung in the air. For the first time, his comrades seemed unsure, not just about the war, but about themselves. They had always seen humans as adversaries, obstacles to overcome. But now, they began to wonder if there was more to the story. Finally, Vren broke the quiet. Do you think it's too late to change anything? Kale didn't answer right away. He looked down at the table, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. It's never too late to try, but it takes courage. To admit we might be wrong, to see our enemies as something more than just targets. If we can do that, maybe, just maybe, there's still hope for both of us. With that, Kale stood up and left the room, leaving his comrades to sit in silence. Outside the viewport, the stars burned brightly, indifferent to the struggles of those who sought to claim them. The aliens glanced at each other, their minds racing with questions and doubts. For the first time, they realized that the war wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about deciding what kind of beings they wanted to be, and whether they could live with the choices they made.